Well, to talk more about the growing fears over cyber war and what the government is doing about it, I'm joined now by Con Hallinan, a columnist for Foreign Policy in Focus. Welcome, Con. So what do you make of the new fears over cyber war? Is it potentially the warfare of the future?
Well, if it didn't cost so much money and it didn't involve bashing China and Russia to a certain extent, it would be kind of amusing. Unfortunately, it is an extremely expensive endeavor, and we're creating this enormous infrastructure, both in the civilian side and on the military side. And, once you put these infrastructures in place, once you create these organizations that deal with intelligence and things, it's very hard to get rid of them. And so I think that you've got a real problem here, not simply in terms of that a lot of this is aimed at China, but what it means for privacy here in the United States, because fear drives people to do some very silly things.
And, we are seeing the military scrambling to obtain new cyber skills. Are the fears justified, or are they blown out of proportion?
They're blown very much out of proportion. The earlier program reported Clark's thing about the fact that there would be this collapse of the infrastructure and things like that. You couldn't shut down the power grid in the United States because we don't have a national power grid. We have more than 100 separate power grids. These are the kinds of things that people bring up. Fear is an enormous motivator in the United States. And particularly if people are using cell phones and computers, they don't really know how these things work. Somebody says someone's going to take those things over, going to make them not work, you can't go to the bank and get this and that. People get scared. And so they say, well, protect us. And that's where the problem comes in.
And Con, this has lawmakers very concerned. Here is Congressman Mike Rogers. He's the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Here he is talking on the issue.
Attack is on its way. We will suffer a catastrophic cyber attack. The clock is ticking.
Meanwhile, FBI Director Robert Mueller has said that the dangers of cyber attacks will equal or surpass the dangers of terrorism in the foreseeable future. How do you feel about cyber warfare being equated to terrorism?
I don't think there's any relationship to it at all. I think most of the first of all, it's not cyber warfare. Most of the cyber stuff that goes on is industrial spying. And that's been going on since Marco Polo bought silkworms out of China. I mean, everybody's trying to get the edge on various kinds of things. It has nothing to do with cyber warfare itself. And I think there's a real danger here because people use this term war, and the Pentagon starts putting up policies where they're going to shoot missiles at people who they think are using cyber attacks and stuff. And this is very dangerous stuff. And go back, in the 1950s, it was the threat of communism. In the 1960s, it was the threat of nuclear war. And in the 1990s, it's been the threat of terrorism. Americans are constantly bombarded with messages of fear. And what it makes them do is it makes them give up things. And in this case, they're giving up a lot of very, very basic democratic rights to privacy.
But Con, we are seeing groups, for example, Anonymous, hacking into CIA's websites, among many others. So isn't that a sign that the government needs to crack down on security measures?
Well, that's very interesting, because the government won't really do what they ought to do, which is what you really want to defend yourself, you encrypt everything. It's very simple. It's the easiest thing to do, and it's absolutely secure. The government doesn't want to do that. The government doesn't want to do that because the military doesn't want to do it. The military doesn't want your computer, cell phones, etc., to be protected by encrypted software because they want to be able to have a back door into people's computers, their cell phones, their iPads, whatever. The simplest way to deal with this is encryption, and the military will fight tooth and nail to prevent that. So my feeling about it is, okay, Anonymous breaks into the CIA or the International Monetary Fund. What do? And you hear about them breaking in. What kind of damage gets done? Have you noticed any economies collapsing as a result of of so-called cyber warfare. I mean, this stuff.
Well, not yet,
is
but isn't there a fear that they could become more advanced and, get the ability to do so?
Well, the thing is that most financial institutions are fully protected. The idea that the United States is way behind is just nonsense. And in fact, the United States is way ahead of the curve here. There's always going to be someone who's going to get your password and break into your bank account or something like that. That's always going to be out there. But this is not a complex thing to stop. This is actually quite easy to stop. Banks, for instance, are not the slightest bit worried about this at all. And I think the problem is, again, it's this atmosphere of fear, and using Pearl Harbor and then talking about China. I mean, that sounds like we are equating China with Imperial Japan. We fought a war against Imperial Japan. Russians did too. That's the kind of hype which can lead to scary places.
All right, Con, thank you so much for weighing in on this issue. That was Con Hallinan, columnist for Foreign Policy in Focus.
My pleasure.